for me, playing in all these different contexts is kind of one of the joys of making music, really. You can, just like when you have a conversation with lots of different people, you, of course, by definition, remain yourself, but you can talk and interact in lots of different contexts. And that's one of the joys of playing this music for me, is that improvisation gives us a sort of lingua franca, or more than that, it's a process by which you can communicate with people, even with whom you don't share a verbal language. The chemistry of groups is kind of a magic thing, and that will take care of itself. So I think for me the most important thing is, if you play your part in a group with sincerity, then the overall dynamic of the group, I think, is often interesting. Of course, there are exceptions to that as well, and that sort of proves the magic of music, the chemistry, the fact that it doesn't always work. But for me, I'm excited just to put myself in contexts with band leaders where I can, where I feel that there's something exciting and creative going on. I would say is that I don't believe there's really much of a distinction between improvisation and composition. I think they're two, maybe they're elements along a continuum of the same behaviour of just being creative and making music. And of course there are certain elements that you associate with composition, fixed elements, and likewise improvisation is usually associated with freedom in that way. But I think there are other dynamics at play. For example, when in a performance do you introduce a composed element? I think it's interesting that it's a mark of respect amongst improvisers. Or if you say to somebody, "That was a very compositional improvisation," that's typically a mark of respect. Or you might say of a composition, "Oh, it flowed very naturally," as though natural wasn't the ordinary thing for a composition. And so I think these two behaviours are really not that distinct necessarily. Talk about free improvisation, and I think free improvisation is something of a misnomer. I think free improvisation for me just means improvisation done well. If I listen to Sonny Rollins play They Say Falling in Love is Wonderful, nothing in this world could be more free than that. He happens to be playing chord changes, he happens to be playing in time, but it's all to do with what facility the musician feels that she or he has at any one moment. So freedom for me isn't tied to being without rules, isn't tied to being without chord changes, without meter, without harmony. It's to do with something broader, facility and freedom, creative freedom, I think. love the tradition so much. I've grown up with it since I was tiny, since I was this big, like out of the bottom of the picture. That's how young I was. But I grew up with this music and I love this music, and my bank manager will tell you the same thing. I spend too much time and money on this music. but I've grown up listening to, from the very earliest players right through. I love Jelly Roll Morton, I love Earl Hines. My hero is Art Tatum. I love the music of Thelonious Monk, Herbie Nichols, Elmo Hope, Andrew Hill. I could go on, I could talk, I could fill hours talking about any one of these musicians whose music I love. How do you find a way in this world populated by these masters? Then actually, I think on reflection, it's a very, there is no pressure, because the only way that you can fit in with that tradition is to be yourself. There have not been any great players who have simply copied what somebody else has done. Yes, you can point to elements, for example, in Monk's language. You can say it's beautiful, I love the way he uses these minor seconds, I love his percussive touch. And yes, you can reduce it to musical elements, but the magic of Monk is that he sounds like himself and no one else. So if I want to pay respect to what he did, if I want to show my debt to him, really the most fundamental way I can do that is just really to do my own thing. The way I think about jazz is that when it started, it was always a Creole music. It was always a mix, whether of Afro-Cuban music, so Sufi music, of Scottish Methodist hymn singing, of European classical music. It was always a Creole, and so for me, borrowing from other traditions is only natural. On the aeroplane on the way here, I was listening to Elliot Carter, who's a musician who I really love. It's very interesting to look at parallels between, for example, the language of people like Elliot Carter and that of Henry Threadgill, or to think about connections between, for example, the language of Steve Coleman and the language of Per Norgard. So the Neue Musik is something that I love, and also the sort of, how would I say, the alte Neue Musik. I mean, Schoenberg and Webern. People are still catching up to that. First met Lewis maybe 8 or 9 years ago now, and it was actually in a quartet led by Evan Parker, and the regular pianist couldn't make it, and so Evan asked if I would play. And I remember when I first got up on stage, Lewis wasn't expecting there to be a piano player on the gig, so he looked at me like, who's this guy getting on stage to play? So I literally hadn't said hello to him even the first time I'd seen him play. I had lots of his records, of course, but never met him. And then, the gig I think was really nice. And, we got talking at the end, and that was fantastic. And then a couple of months after that, Lewis had a concert with his own band in London. And I was in the audience, and at half time between the sets, he saw me in the audience as he came out and asked if I'd like to join them for the second set. And I did, and which was sort of crazy because I didn't know any of the tunes, but I would have been even more crazy to say no. And so I joined the band for that, and ever since then he's kept asking me. So I've been very lucky to play with the maestro in lots of different contexts. We do a duo. We've recorded a couple of duo albums. We play in this quartet, which will be coming to Berlin, in a larger ensemble. All sorts of different contexts. So yeah, it's an honour.
you.